Hey everybody, Adam here with Hometown Acres. Welcome back. Today we are going to finally start working on the final step of this journey that we have been on for the last month or two, which is to start pumping water from this lower pond up to the upper pond. If you guys remember, that was the entire sole purpose of digging this pond down here, was purely as a water source for the upper pond. And today we're going to make that happen, and I think I've got a pretty unique solution for it that many of you may not have seen before. So just to recap quickly what we are up against, we have about a half-acre pond sitting up there in front of the house. That's the back side of the dam up there. We've struggled for 3 years now to get it full. We robbed a bunch of clay from down in here to seal the inside of the upper pond, and that ended up creating this pond down here because we created a big depression. We found a bunch of groundwater, and now we have this beautiful pond down here. But the whole purpose was to provide clay for the upper pond and also a water source so we don't have to drill a well. Well, then comes the problem, how do we get this water from down here all the way up there? I've mentioned before it's about a 45-foot drop in elevation from the upper pond to down here, so we've got 45 foot of head. And in doing my research, there's a couple different options that I was considering. The first would be the least expensive on the install side, but the most maintenance and upkeep, and I call it the PETA factor, right? The pain in the you-know-what. That would be just a trash pump or some kind of irrigation pump that's either gasoline powered, diesel powered, PTO powered on the back of a tractor. And that's something that would be very low cost to get into, but you're gonna have to come down here and start it every day, turn it off every day. Do you really wanna be putting hours on a tractor on an irrigation pump? It just didn't seem like something I wanted to be fooling with. Plus, not to mention the noise that a running engine is going to cause. And if you're ever actually hanging out down here by this pond, is that something you really want to be listening to? So in my book, doing something like that was out. Even though you'd have a tremendous cost savings on the install side, it just wasn't worth it. Now the next option would be a submersible well pump that runs off of grid power. And the problem with that is we don't have power anywhere down around here. Even in the new building up there, we never put power in. We have backup portable solar generators that will run the lights inside the building. So there's no grid power down here. And I think it would be very costly to get grid power down here. The house is about 300 yards away, maybe 400 yards away. And that's a long ditch. So a grid powered submersible well pump was out of the question as well. So if a trash pump is out of the question and a submersible grid tied submersible pump is out of the question, where does that leave us? Well, as you can see over here, we have an abundance of sunshine on this side of the pond. And so we have a submersible pump that will be powered by the sun. Let me show you that real quick before we get started. All right, so here's what we decided to go with. This is a fully turnkey kit from RPS Solar for pumping water off grid. If you're not familiar, RPS stands for Rural Power Systems. And that's what they do, is water pumps and off-grid water pumps. Now they do offer grid-tied pumps as well. The pump that they sized me for, given my needs and everything, is a 1.5 horsepower pump. And at the 45 foot of head pressure that I have, they're saying that I should be able to pump about 52 gallons per minute, which is an incredible amount of water. I can't wait to get this thing hooked up and see if that's what we're actually gonna get or not. The line that now, even though this is a pretty much turnkey kit, you do still have to buy a couple of things just because they can't, make this one size fits all. Everybody's application is going to be a little bit different. So your length between the solar array and where the pump goes into the water could be different. But for our situation, I had to buy a 300-foot roll, and I don't know if you can see it, it's actually sitting over there right now, 300-foot roll of 2-inch poly pipe. That's what this 1.5 horse pump is sized for. And then you do have to buy, they give you some rails and things for a scalable ground mount, but you still have to buy the post. And you can do that however you'd like, but they do have a recommendation that they like people using 2-inch galvanized steel pipe, almost like a real thick heavy-duty fence post. And then all of the other mounting hardware mounts very easily to that. So now, speaking from my experience of getting this solar-powered pump ordered from RPS, the process could not have been smoother. And actually, it was worth the phone call in. Even if I hadn't gotten anything, it would have been worth the phone call in just to learn some things that I didn't know. Like on my pond up there, given the size, the depth, the amount of water, the volume that's in that pond, they were able to give me a really good idea of how much water I'm losing to evaporation. And they said based on the size of that pond and even our longitude and latitude lines, how far we are away from the equator, on a good, hot, dry, sunny summer day, we could be losing around 9,000 gallons of water every single day, which blew me away. I had no idea we could be losing that much. So little things like that. And then as far as actually sizing a system, I mean, I had no idea what I needed. I probably would have got something way too small. And they said, oh, if you're fighting a possible leak still, and you've got evaporation issues as well, let's double the amount of water that you're losing. So like I said, this thing will put out 58 gallons per minute. And you know, during the summer months when you've got a good solid 6 hours of sunshine on the solar panels, we should be able to produce somewhere between 18,000, 20,000 gallons of water a day, which should completely overcompensate for evaporation. And if the pond is still leaking any, we should be able to overcompensate for that as well. So again, I was thoroughly impressed with how knowledgeable these people were about head pressure and flow rates and evaporation rates and all that stuff. So even if you don't want to get a pump, give them a call and you're probably going to learn something if you've got a pond. One more question I had that they were able to answer was, okay, if we're producing 58 gallons per minute, 18 to 20,000 gallons per day, how long will it take to fill my pond up the rest of the way? And they said, yep, we can answer that too. About 45 days is what they estimate once we get up and running, and assuming we have good sunshine and not 45 days of clouds. But tell you what, we've been fighting with this pond for 3 years, and if we're going to be able to fill it up in 45 days, sounds like the answer to my pond problems we've had for a while. Now, the only thing I'll have to be careful of, and there's a solution to that too, is not completely draining the lower pond. I mean, that's its whole purpose, is to provide water for the upper pond, but I also don't, now that it looks nice, I don't want to drain it completely empty and just have a big mud pit down there. And the answer to that is they also have a float switch on here that if the water level gets too low in the lower pond, it will kill the power to the pump and not pump water anymore. And there's also a float switch on the inside of the upper pond that if that one gets full, it'll stop pumping water as well. So that's why I like this system over a trash pump. Even though it is a little bit more money than just going and buying a Harbor Freight trash pump, it's completely hands-free once you get it set up. You don't have to go down here and check on it. It'll maintain itself. So without further ado, I've got my post holes marked. We are facing perfectly south. We have plenty of sunshine, no trees or anything that's going to block our sunlight here. I did want to, as far as location where I picked it out, I didn't want to put it right down by the pond because I want to keep that kind of looking nice and not junk it up with a solar array. That is the one thing, is they can be kind of an eyesore. But this area up here is out away from the pond, and if we ever want to expand it in the future, we're close enough to the building that we could use half of the solar array for the pump in the pond, and then the other half we should still have available to expand, add panels, and run it to the building there. So here's what happens when you hit a big rock with an auger on the front end loader of a tractor. It picks the whole front end up and swings you over a little bit. All right, so I mentioned before, mostly everything is included with this kit with the exception of a handful of items. These posts being one of them. These are 2-inch inner diameter galvanized steel pipes. I believe they're 2 3/8 outer diameter. And these are what is going to serve as our posts and our cross members going in between. So this will be what our the general makeup of our framework. Now I'm going to take a page out of my good friend Adam from Indie Farm Life's playbook. If you're working by yourself and setting posts, good way to do it is take a 1x6 or a 2x6 and now cut a 2-inch hole in the center of the board, and it will hold your posts up while you get them leveled and get concrete set around them. I thought that was a good idea worth sharing. By the way, he just got done doing the same exact thing with the same exact company, RPS, for his well, or for his pond. But his setup's a little bit different because he's pumping water from a well, I'm pumping water from a pond. So same concept, just different water source. Now, even though I am dry pouring these, I'm still going to add some water to the hole just so it doesn't take 3 days for that concrete to suck moisture out of the ground to start setting. So I'm not mixing it, but that will exponentially speed up the process of getting that to moisten and then set and cure. All right, so our posts are all set. Can't do much more until that concrete cures a little bit more. Then we'll come out here, cut our posts off at our desired heights, get our cross members on here. In the meantime, while we're waiting for that concrete to set up, let's go see what we can work on with the pump side. All right, so first things first, we got to get the pump assembled. It comes in two different parts, the pump motor and the pump end, and they connect. Once we do that, because we are not dropping this in a well, we actually need to build a filter for it. And so the plan for that is going to be to take some PVC, drill a bunch of holes in it, put 2 end caps on, and then I've got some very fine wire mesh that we will wrap around that. This will slide inside there, and that will act as a filter to keep dirt and debris out of this. Again, because it's going to be in a pond where dirt and debris are likely, if you're just dropping this down straight into a clean freshwater well, you probably don't have to do something like that. And then once we get done with that, then we need to build a float for it so that we can keep this up off the bottom of the pond. The idea there would be to have a float at the surface and then have this sitting maybe just 12 inches down below the surface. That way it can rise and fall as the water level in the pond rises and falls. So enough talking, let's go ahead and get it put together. Now we're going to start working on the filter for this. And as you can see, I decided to go with a 6-inch piece of PVC as opposed to 4-inch, because even though this will fit inside the 4-inch, if you're not familiar with well pumps, they suck all their water from this section right here. So even if I drill holes all the way through here, this was a pretty snug fit all the way through. So really, I feel like the only holes that would allow water to come in to feed the pump would be this section right here. And knowing that this is going to produce about 58 gallons per minute, I don't want to starve the pump for water. And I feel like having a 6-inch is going to allow all of the holes that I put in up here and over here to allow water to come in and work its way to that center of that pump. So that's why we're going with 6-inch for the filter. Now time to make some Swiss cheese. looks good. Now we're going to go ahead and wrap it in this 40 mesh screen here. All right, so now we have our filter pretty much done. And as you can see, again, the pump is going to be sitting right inside that like that. And now I've got holes all around it. A nice filter screen should be pumping nice crystal clean clear water through that pump and not having it get plugged up with moss or leaves or frogs. So what we need to work on next is the float. And I think I have kind of a unique idea for this float. So my idea for this is I've got a piece of 4-inch Schedule 40 PVC. I'm going to put 2 end caps on this, and then this will be sitting above, about 12 inches above that filter with the pump that we just had, and this is what's going to float that. But that pump is fairly heavy. It's probably 40 or 50 pounds, especially once you add the PVC. So my thought is to make sure that this will actually float that, because this is not a lot of air in here, I'm going to put a Schrader valve on here, same thing that's on your bicycle tire or car tire, and actually pressurize the air in here. Now, Schedule 40 PVC is good for up to 220 PSI. I'm not going to do anything near that amount because pressurized air is like a bomb waiting to go off. I'm probably going to do, I don't know, 20, 30 pounds, same as what's in a car tire. And I think that'll give this a lot more buoyancy to hold up this pump. So that's the plan. We're going to get started on that now. And here is our Schrader valve. Now when we're putting this in, we want to make sure that we do not over drill this hole, otherwise we're not going to be able to pressurize it at all. So we're going to start with a smaller drill bit and work our way up until we have a nice snug fit. And I'm even going to put a little bit of pipe thread on there as well. Now the question becomes, do I put this in the center here, or do I put it on one of the ends? I think I'm going to put it in the center, and just when I put this out in the water, I will try to make sure that the Schrader valve is pointing up. Not that it would matter, but as far as long-term reliability, I think it would last longer if it was out of the water. I think that's going to work just perfect. In case you're wondering, that is a 3/8 inch bit, and I think that's going to work perfect. I'm going to put some Teflon tape on this, and hopefully that'll create a nice airtight seal for us. All right, this is what's going to be our float. Now I'm not going to pressurize it yet because I want this glue to fully set up. I'm going to wait at least 24 hours before I try to fill this with air. All right, so what it is the next day, our concrete posts should be firmed up enough that we can work on them. What we got to do now is get these posts cut down to the right height. And so I'm going to take a 2x3 across the top here, clamp it down, put a level on it, and make sure we're all level across the top. And this post that I'm working on right now is the lowest one, and so that's going to determine what our level needs to be. So right about there, you can see if this post is our lowest one, we're going to have to cut off about yay much on this one. Now that we have the height of our back post set and level, now we need to go ahead and set our front post. and this is where we need to determine what that angle is going to be. And I just looked up, based on our zip code, our optimal angle of tilt for solar panels to maximize sun exposure in the winter is 47 degrees, in the summer is 17 degrees, and in the spring and fall it's about 32.5 degrees. And so because this is a fixed mount, you want to take the spring and fall, and you'll get a little bit less in the winter and a little bit less in the summer, but this will be a good average for year-round use. And so in order to find what this angle needs to be, I've got an app on my phone I can use to give me that slope to figure out where we need to cut off our front posts at. So if you have an iPhone, within your measure tool, there is, I'm pretty close right there. I'm at 31 degrees just by eyeballing it. So that would mean we need to come up or down. I don't know. Guess and check. Down. Right there is 32. So that will be the angle that will cut off both of those posts. So then once we mark this, then we'll take that cross beam and go directly level across from this one, mark that one, get both of those cut off. So then the kit from RPS comes with these mounting brackets, and you can see how they work. Basically this sits on top of the post, and then you've got these two U-bolts that are going to support your cross member. So let's get these installed. Oop. Before we do that, let's not forget to take off our one-man band mounting plates. Now apparently the ratchet strap tie down equivalent of that ain't going nowhere, anytime you're building a header, is you got to do a pull up on it. 20! Welcome back to the channel. Alright, the next thing we got to do is get our solar panel mount rails assembled. So basically each one is going to be 3 sections of rails just like this, and they'll be connected with these little angle brackets. So I'm going to do all that. Going to be very repetitive. I'll put you on a time lapse. All right, so I got all the tracks put together. Pretty simple how those go. You can see there is a bracket that goes in between each section of track. There's 3 sections, 2 brackets, 6 bolts for each bracket. Now we're going to go ahead and mount basically the same exact bracket that we had on there before, but this is what will attach it to those 2-inch pieces of galvanized steel. All right, so our rails are all assembled and ready for installation on our solar array. As you can see, that little mounting bracket we put on here, U-bolt goes up around the bottom side and bolts on and locks that in place. So I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of these done, and then we'll be ready for solar panels. And I think that's where we're going to wrap this video up. All right, so I've got the first panel up of 6. We're going to end up having 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I think we should have some spare room for an extra couple of panels up at the top. But how these things mount onto this expandable ground mount is they've got these clamps on here. So this is a Z clamp, this goes on the end, and then in between your panels you have a T clamp like this that can, as you see, bite one panel, and then when you slide the next one in, it'll bite that one as well and give you a really nice solid connection to the solar array frame. So I'll catch back up with you when I get all these mounted. All right guys, that's a good stopping point for today. We got the solar array up. We have our pump pretty much all assembled, filter assembled, float assembled. And now we're ready to, get away from the building construction phase and get more into the electrical wiring and the plumbing phase. That's a whole different set of tools. I need to go regroup, empty out all the stuff that I have in the back of the side-by-side, load up all the plumbing and electrical tools, and then hopefully in the next video, we will be putting this thing to the test and see if it actually produces the claimed 58 gallons per minute.